Hello, BookTube. I'm Shawn the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. I am here with a panoply of very special guests for a very special video. This Zoom chat is about year-end and New Year's nerdy bookish stuff, rituals, traditions, all that good stuff. And let me introduce the panel, the panoply, three of my bookish besties. First off, I think it's to my left. That's how it looks on my screen. I don't know what it's going to look like on the video, but to my left is Lindy from Edmonton, Alberta. Welcome back, Lindy.
Hi, Shawn.
And below her, in the Brady Bunch squares here, is Britta Bowler of Britta Bowler, the BookTube channel. Welcome back, Britta, darling.
Hello, Shawn and Lindy and Tina. Hi.
And to Britta's right is Tina Cover, the preeminent translator and reader extraordinaire. Hello, Tina.
Hello.
We are going to talk about year-end reading stuff, and then we're going to move into New Year's, beginning of the year reading stuff, and then we're going to talk about some books that we're planning to start the new year off with. So, what kind of year-end reading traditions or rituals or neuroses do you have?
Well, I don't know that I have any year-end reading traditions per se, but I know that hopefully all of us are on a little bit of a break, and so I like to just spend as much time kind of just lying on the couch, reading and being cozy as I can. So I tend to buy a lot of books at this time of year, and especially ones that I'm really excited to read, and then I just luxuriate in having this nice big stack of books that I can just devote myself to without a lot of interruptions. I can just read for hours with a cup of tea. It's one of my favorite things.
And I know that you just have come off a big translation project. Do I have that right?
Well, I'm in the middle of a major sort of glut of work. I have just finished one book. I'm finishing another one today, if you can believe it or not, translating another one, finishing that today. Then I have another one to do immediately afterward, and then another one to do immediately after that. So I'm very busy until March.
Okay, that's fabulous for us.
Oh, these are the kind of problems you want to have. This is
That's
great,
right.
believe me. I'm not complaining.
But it sounds like you're purposefully carving out some space to just luxuriate, which is a fabulous word, and enjoy some reading.
You have to. You absolutely have to.
Does that resonate with anybody else out there?
Luxuriating resonates with me immediately.
Yes.
I have to incorporate that word and the actual activity. I'm indeed off work, so it's not like Tina. I'm off work and then she tells us that she just finished one book and she is working on another one. No, I'm actually not working this week, so I have time to luxuriate. But I do have some rituals. I like to finish what I'm reading before January 1st, so I don't like to, what they call, carry books over. I just don't, for some reason. So what I often do is, now today is the 28th. I have two buddy reads, which we will finish before the 1st of January. And then I want to read a book just for me, for myself. But then I tend to pick up a book that I have already read this year. So if I don't manage to finish it by the 31st, I can just put it away because I've read it already. So that is sort of a trick. And then, of course, you have all these rituals of statistics, looking up how many books you read and how many translated work. And I did very bad with translated work, only read 15 or so this year. This is really bad. No, it's bad, Tina, it's bad. So I promise to do better next year. All that statistic stuff that I like at the end of the year, to look at what kind of books did you read and what was your favorite read and this kind of thing. It always makes me happy.
That's awesome. So I'd like to spend some more time on would you call it a superstition, Britta, about not wanting to carry books over, or how would you describe that? Have you always had it?
Yeah, it's more if you are sort of an anal obsessed person, you want to have a clean slate on the 1st of January, which is completely stupid because it's an arbitrary thing that we celebrate this day of New Year's. But for me, it's like the clean slate, and the book card is empty for January, and then January 1st I put new books in there and I start a new book, and the first read of the year, it's all in my head. Nothing to do with superstition. It's more this idea, year end, you clean out your fridge, you clean out the books. I always clean out my closet as well, the clothes, these kind of rituals to start fresh.
I very much relate to the idea of starting fresh, and I even have that at various stages, more pronounced than others, where even on a monthly basis, I like to start fresh. But if I have a long-term buddy read, like I often read short story collections as a buddy read, where it's one short story a week, and I have maybe only one of those that's definitely going to carry over into the new year. I'm okay with that. But in terms of stuff that I'm reading myself, I very much want to finish everything up by New Year's Eve, and I have now calculated how much reading that's going to be for the next, now 3 days. I actually have nothing else to do, but it's
worse than I am. You're calculating the reading time.
Yeah, I realize it's going to be a bit of a reading marathon, and maybe I won't get there, but I want to.
That's so funny.
Yeah, because we're going to talk in a little while about New Year's stuff, and I've got my January TBR and some New Year's resolutions, and if I carry any of these over, it's going to just screw that all up. So how does this resonate with you, Lindy?
I have monthly things that I do, mainly that at the end of each month, I look at my highlights of which books that I read that month, because I usually have about 30 books. I read about a book a day, and I put a post on my book blog, which were my favorites. I'm really old school.
We're going to link all that below for everybody, whatever they got. Yep, Twitter and
then at the end of the year, so at the end of December, I also look at my favorite books of the entire year and do a post about that, which I've done. It means that I'm ignoring the ones that I'm going to read from now till the end of the year. So sometimes
cut off.
I'm nervous because maybe, the very best book is still to come. And also often the book that I'm reading or have just finished reading in my mind is the very best book. So I'm also doing stats. And this is just for me, so that I can compare year to year how diverse my reading is, because I have a general goal to read as diversely as possible. But these are the books that really make me feel good too, that I feel like I've expanded my worldview. And so that's what I'm always looking for. And it's just kind of fun to be making pie charts and all that kind of stuff with my reading. So there's a lot going on at the end of the year. And so what I end up doing often is the several books that I've got on the go at the moment, I want to stretch them out until January. So that's when I'll count them, because they don't fall into the stats for 2020.
So you have that time to kind of digest. I'm having that issue with a book that I'm doing on audio, and it's so close to the end of the year, and it's feeling like it could be my book of the year, but I'm just not, it's too close. Like I need space for it to breathe in my consciousness. So it may be a contender, a late 2020 contender for my 2021 book of the year if nothing eclipses it, but it's so close to the end that I just, it feels weird. So I want to see if Britta has different stats or different take on stats, and then see what Tina thinks of all this.
I love doing the stats, but just like you said, Lindy, just for myself. I keep a Goodreads page. That's because it's handy to have all the shelves and what to read and, to keep track of books. But the whole statistic thing is just for me. And I'm old school, analog as well. So I do it in a bullet journal, counting how many, authors of color did I read? How many nonfiction versus fiction did I read? How many translated works did I read, from which languages, which countries? I love the statistics thing, but it's also like what you said, Lindy, to see which books I felt really broadened my horizon, or did I read a lot of South American books, then maybe next year focus a little bit more on Asian countries, stuff like that. And then, of course, I forget all about it when the new year starts, and then I'm just reading what I feel like. But I like to sort of categorize the reading at the end of the year just for my own pleasure.
And you do videos with some year-end tops and flops.
Yeah, I do that, but that's only, I do 2 videos most of the time. One is a sort of a backlist video.
Yep.
I put that up end of December, and then the next one on a Wednesday or something. So I do fiction and nonfiction all together in the top, and I only do a top 3, and I'm not ranking them. It's just the 3 books that stayed with me the most, that I favor. And I do the same for new releases. At least I do this year, because I made a conscious effort to read at least 2 or 3 new releases a month. So I didn't want to mix that up, but that's all I do statistic wise on YouTube. I just give it a sort of top 3 and a flop also. I always do flops because people love, for some reason, they love also the not so successful reads.
I just don't understand that at all, Britta. My main end of year ritual, I'm not someone that does all those stats. I think it's fascinating, and I think I used to do it at least on a monthly basis, track how diverse my reading was and this and that, and I've stopped because I just kind of got myself into the habit of just doing it, and I don't need to track it particularly. But I track how many books I read in a year, and I choose not to give the number out on BookTube, for example, because I just don't want to encourage that kind of competitive idea of how many books you read has any status in the BookTube community. I read a lot of books. I don't think I read as much as probably anybody else. In this particular chat, I don't publicize it, but I track it for myself. And if people want to go and snoop around my Goodreads, if they go to the main part of Goodreads, it's not an accurate count because it doesn't subtract the bales. So I have a separate one that's minus the bales, but I just don't promote it. But what I do, this will be the 3rd or 4th. I think this year will be the 4th. I'm not sure. Anyway, it'll 3rd or 4th Besties and Worsties video.
Oh, I love that video. I love that video. Yeah.
Actually, that's the first comment you ever left on my channel, Britta, was on my first Besties and Worsties video. And I talk about the best books and the worst books and the best opening paragraph and the best sex scene and the worst sex scene, and anything that idiosyncratically resonates with my reading personality. And I have a great time doing it, as long as I don't drink too much before I finish filming the video. One year I was a little bit iffy, but other than that, I don't have so many year-end rituals. How about you, Tina? These other lovely ladies were talking about stats and stuff. Do you do any of that, or do you have any other year-end stuff?
No, it's incredible. I'm so impressed that people have the wherewithal to keep track of everything like this. And I read a lot of books in a year. I'm sure it's between 250 and 350 probably. I read a lot, but a lot of it, I will admit, I just sort of devour so quickly and then forget. I mean, as we all know, not every book you read stays with you. And as soon as I finish one, I'm generally like, okay, well, what's next? And even by the time I would think about maybe putting a rating up on Goodreads or whatever, I haven't done it. It's too late. I've forgotten. I mean, I'm one of those people that reads a book description on, let's say, Amazon, because I have a Kindle, and I'll be like, oh, that sounds great. And I'll click to buy it. And it turns out I bought it 3 years ago and have read it, but I've forgotten.
That sounds like a lot like my love life in the 90s.
Well, that's a different chat, I think. I think we'll have to revisit that topic. Maybe save it for your autobiography.
Besties and worsties.
Yes. But yeah, no, I don't do anything like that, but I love watching other people's, and I always come away with some additions to my TBR list. And quite often somebody will be like, well, this was just absolutely terrible. And it's such a relief because I will have thought so too. And especially when a book is really a popular one or one that's been hyped up a lot. And then if I read it and I just think it's terrible, and I'm just like, oh God, maybe it's just me, maybe it's just me. And then when I hear that other people have felt the same way and are articulating why the book was bad, it's just so validating. It's good to hear, because those are important conversations too. I would like to think that publishers, especially ones where you have a lot of new people, young people who are keeping an eye on BookTube and Bookstagram and stuff like that, I would like to think that they're taking note just as much of the criticisms as they are of the exaltations. Not every book is good, and there's no reason to pretend.
You would hope that they would. I completely understand what you're saying about the devouring. And I think that's why I keep track, because then at least at the end of the year, when I go through the list, oh, I don't remember this. What was this about? Oh, yeah. At least I know it's there somewhere kept.
Yeah.
Because I mean, when I go to my bookcase, I'm pointing that way because this is nonfiction workbooks and stuff. But when I go to the fiction and then I take a book out and I know I read it because otherwise it wouldn't be in the bookcase. No memory whatsoever. Yeah. And it can even happen that I then reread it and I go 2/3 of the book until it clicks and then I know how it ends. But sometimes even that doesn't happen. I have to actually read till the end. So I think that is one of the reasons to sort of wanting to keep track. I just forget stuff.
That's why I started keeping track. Way back in 1993, I started keeping a book journal because what I found was I worked at the public library. I'm retired now. And I would talk to people about books, but I could remember everything that happened in the book, but not the title and not the author. So by keeping a book journal, it just helped fix that in my mind. And plus I would look back through it to refresh my memory. And then in about 2009, I started doing it electronically with Shelfari. And then when that died, shifted to Goodreads. And the monthly review also is part of that, helping to fix things in my memory. So yeah, it really does help to write it down in some way. Plus, with electronic, I can use, I think I have about 225 different shelves in Goodreads. And so it's easy for me to sort. You know, I remember that it was written by a woman and that it was science fiction and that it was Canadian, and I can pull it up that way. I guess that's kind of a librarian thing too, all that categorizing.
Yeah.
Fabulous. I think that as a booktuber, and I do a lot of reviews, and even books that I don't review, I talk about them in my Friday reads, and I have in the past written Goodreads reviews, although I've gotten away from that. All of those activities imprint the book more deeply, and even if I don't remember the details of how I thought, I have a place to go back and check, like you guys said. So just before we move on from end of year to new year, I wanted to ask Tina if you're planning to finish all these books you're luxuriating in by the end of 2020, or whether you're carrying them over.
Oh, I mean, I don't have any rules either way, really. I have a feeling I will finish most of them, but it's arbitrary because my TBR stack, my virtual TBR pile is so big that just where I cut it off is completely arbitrary. There's no particular point that I want to have gotten to by the new year.
So you don't have that sense of...
No, this is all kind of a revelation for me. I just read like a wild animal. I just tear through everything. I don't have any rules or rituals. I kind of feel like I should now.
No, I don't think you should, but it's just interesting to compare notes.
Oh yeah, no, it's fascinating. I'm loving this.
Yeah. I don't think I ever thought of it until I got active on Bookish social media. I think I started out on Litzy, and that's how Lindy and I met. And it was only at that point that I started to read more than one book at the same time and write reviews, and got into wanting to finish books on a monthly basis and certainly on a yearly basis, but it never occurred to me before that. So
me neither.
Yeah.
I have no idea how many books I read in a month or a year before I became active in YouTube book community and then Goodreads and things like that. It never even occurred to me that would be a thing to do, to count books.
Here's a question. Do you think that makes you read more or read differently if you keep track this way?
Not read more. I don't think that has any influence. The amount of reading really depends on how much time I have to read. But what it did do is that I realized things that I hadn't realized before. We were talking about translated work, and I always thought I read a lot of translated work because a lot of translated work sticks in my mind, and it's always ending up in the best of. And when I started counting, I realized, well, It's not that much, actually. You read probably one, maybe two of the books you read in a month is a translated work. So it's more that you realize things are maybe not quite as you thought that they were. And that helped me then focus on certain aspects, because I think it expands your mind if you read authors from other countries that have been translated. And then I do a more of a conscious effort to increase the number. So in that sense, it influenced what I'm reading, but not the amount in general.
What do you think, Lindy?
I don't think that it influences amount either. One thing I like about Litzy is my personal goal to write a review of everything that I read. It does help to think more about the book and what the author's intentions were and how it filters through my own head, and then it sticks more in my mind. So that's another memory thing. Like Britta, sometimes I'm surprised when I look back at my stats. I think, for example, I'm really curious this year about the Canadian content in my reading, because I was a Shadow Giller juror this year for the first time. That meant reading a whole bunch of Canadian fiction and short stories. And I'm curious to see if it will have skewed compared to previous years, how much Canadian content there's been in my reading. So it's not so much numbers, but more about percentage, I guess.
Distribution.
Yeah. And a conscious effort about reading more women, female authors, stuff like that. But when I don't keep track, then I can have a completely wrong idea of my percentages of reading, and that helps me keep track and then also do something if I feel that I want to improve a certain area.
That's a good segue to talking about the new year and any New Year's resolutions you might have as a nerdy bookish person. Let's start with who's the nerdiest of the three? No, it's a tie. So let's
be careful, Shawn.
let's go alphabetically. Is that a safe choice, Britta?
Okay, yeah, alphabetically. Well, we talked about translated fiction. So one of the things that I definitely want to pay more attention to and do more of an effort to read translated fiction. So I already have a Goodreads shelf with the 2021 releases, translated work. And whenever I come across something, I put it in there. And for the rest, I have a couple of things that I always do. I do the Reading Women Challenge. That's a podcast mainly, but they also have a website. They have 24 prompts. For instance, one of the prompts this year is read a book. The book cover is designed by a woman. Well, that is something that I never pay attention to, ever. Who designed the cover? I mean, I look whether I like the cover, but I don't pay attention to who designed it. So I do this challenge every year because it also expands my way of looking at books. And the translated fiction is certainly something that I want to do better. Tina, I promise, I'm going to do better.
And that's fabulous that you mentioned the Reading Women Challenge and the Reading Women podcast, because that's like this 5 degrees of separation between all of us. Tina has been a guest on the Reading Women podcast, and Lindy and I got to know Kendra Winchester on Litzy, and Britta knows Kendra through BookTube. So Kendra and I are doing a buddy read, an Alice Munro buddy read in January. So yes. Actually, I wasn't going to make any stupid jokes about BLT, Britta, Lindy, Tina, but I just did it. So I'll decide whether I'll edit it out later. But let's go to Lindy.
I like it.
BLT.
I actually don't have any New Year's book resolutions or any kind of resolutions. Yeah.
It's just not your thing? Like you never have done that? Because you make all these stats at the end of the year, but it doesn't kind of translate into...
Another thing that I've started doing at the end of the year, so for the past 4 years, is I look at reading challenges. The one that I look at the most is the Book Riot Read Harder Challenge, except that I look at last year, so 2020. So people have been using that challenge throughout this past year. But I don't look at it until the end of the year. And then I look at it and see, how well did I do without having this challenge in front of me?
Mm-hmm.
How does my reading compare? And so I just looked at it yesterday. I had something in every category, in some cases, 35 books in a category, or
Wow.
20 books in another category. The only one that I didn't have a single book that fit into the category was read a play by an author who's a person of color or queer. And normally I read at least one play a year, but it's usually Shakespeare. This year I didn't read any plays.
Well, there's your queer playwright.
No, I didn't read any plays this year, but I thought, okay, if I'm really stretching things, I could count Interior Chinatown by Charles Yu, because it's kind of like a script in a way of, yeah, it's a stretch, but.
I think you've done well. Tina, do you make bookish New Year's resolutions?
No, I think any kind of resolution is kind of a recipe for,
Failure?
disappointing yourself. Yeah. So I don't. I do have my big pile still to be read, and I've got several big, exciting books coming out this year, translated by friends. So I'm certainly going to make a point of reading those. So that, as far as resolutions go, that would be the closest thing for me.
Okay, great. And we're going to be talking about books in just a minute. I have two bookish New Year's resolutions. One is I'm famous for bailing. I don't know if any of you have happened to notice that. And one of the reasons that I bail so much is because I have kind of an allergy about knowing too much about the book going in. I like to go into a book blind, to the point where I don't even like to read the synopsis on the back cover or on Goodreads. And I have decided, I'm still a little bit ambivalent about it, so I may abandon this New Year's resolution early in the year, but I am going to commit to reading the synopsis before buying the book, before starting to read the book. Because usually things like magical realism, which I can't stand, and ghosts in literature, a few pet peeves like that, probably reading the synopsis would take care of that, and I just wouldn't bother to buy it or even start to read it. So that's very tentative New Year's resolution. I still would prefer to just go in blind, and the money that I quote unquote waste by buying books that I just not Shawn books, it's just the cost of my reading peccadillos. But the one that I am much more attached to is I am a polyamorous reader. I'm always reading, on average during 2020, I have been reading at least a dozen, sometimes more like 18 books at the same time. And I have decided,
Amazing.
I don't know if it's amazing, Tina, I think it's out of control. Reading a bunch of books at the same time is really the optimal way for me to read, but I am going to pare it way down in 2020 to a maximum of 6. So that's my really solid New Year's resolution. Now I have some wiggle room in that buddy reads where I'm reading a short story a week. I'm not counting, and I'm not counting audiobooks that I'm listening to when I'm just out walking. So there is some leeway, but otherwise 6 books max, because it doesn't happen often, but it does happen that when I have 18 books or 15 books that I'm reading concurrently, that one gets put to the side for like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and then I kind of lose the thread of it, and that is counterproductive. So I'm going to try paring that down while still keeping the model, because it really does work for me to put a book down and pick up another book and then just cycle through them. And there's something about picking the book back up the next day and having to kind of pick up the strands of the narrative and page back and stuff that imprints the book more deeply. But maybe it's the disappearing brain cells as I age. I used to say dozen was my sweet spot, but I'm going to try 6 and see if that goes better. So to conclude this fabulous year-end, beginning of the year bookish chat, we're going to talk about a couple books that we're planning to start the new year with. And why don't we start with, let's go reverse alphabet. Tina.
Okay, well, I will tell you the one that I am about to read, and that is the latest in the series of murder mysteries. Sorry, Shawn. Set in set in Iceland. by Ragnar Jonasson. And the one that I've just finished is called Whiteout, and that was translated by Quentin Bates. But the next book in the series is coming out, or it's just come out in the US and Canada maybe, but I don't think it's quite out here, translated by David Warrener, who's Canadian, translated from the French actually. I'm excited about that. That's kind of the next one in my pile. Let me just tell you one more because it's very exciting.
Great.
Jonathan Stroud has a new series coming out, and I don't know if any of you have read Jonathan Stroud. Yeah, okay, he's incredible, right? I mean, the Lockwood and Company series is one of my favorite series ever. And Shawn, you would hate it because they're not only are they mysteries, it's all about ghosts.
Oh,
So
yeah.
you would absolutely loathe the series, but he is the most wonderful writer, such a good writer, and he's got a new series starting in 2021, which is going to be sort of Old West supernatural.
Okay.
Yep. And so it's called The Outlaws, Scarlet and Brown, and the first one comes out in April. So I've already pre-ordered my copy, and I'm super psyched.
Oh, that's fabulous. And I saw lots of facial and other reactions. So please, ladies, chime in on Tina's books. I saw Lindy going like this. So
Yeah, I didn't know that Stroud had a new series coming out. It sounds fantastic. I'm looking forward to it too.
Ghosts, Outlaws, West. I didn't know that either. I didn't know that he had a new series. So fantastic. I have a few slots reserved for male writers every year. Not many, but a couple. So he's going into one of those. That's for sure.
Yeah.
you heard it here
Well-
first on Shawn the Book Maniac. Britta's going to read a male writer. Lindy, what have you got? Tell us about a couple books.
I'm really looking forward to Allie Smith's final book in the seasonal quartet.
Mm-hmm.
Allie Smith is one of those authors that I will read everything that she writes. Even if it's a book a year, it's not fast enough for me. And I have this weird habit of when I know that there's not going to be another one, I hold off. And that's what I've been doing with summer. Number one, I was waiting for it from the library and I decided it's going to take too long. So I bought my own copy and I still haven't read it. But I've decided that that's going to be my January 1st. I'm going to treat myself. And another one that I'm really looking forward to is Hench, which is a thriller, and it's about an office assistant working for a monster. So
that sounds like my life.
But yeah, it sounds really different. That's one of the things that I'm always looking for in books, is something that's a bit different. I love unique voices. I love different takes on the world, which is one of the reasons why I love science fiction. I would say this kind of falls into the science fiction category. I like when there's ideas that stimulate my own thinking.
So I'm not familiar at all with that author of that last book.
So Natalie Zena Walschatz is the author. She's actually a game designer from Toronto.
Wow.
Okay, wow. Haven't heard of her either, no. Yeah.
And has she written books before?
I have no idea.
Oh, okay.
Unlike you, I do spend a lot of time reading reviews and synopses, and I usually have a really good idea if I'm going to like a book or not before I start reading it, which is probably one of the reasons why my average rating on Goodreads is 4 stars, because I can usually tell if it's something that I'm not going to like.
Do you remember, how did you find out about this book or this writer originally? It wasn't on my channel.
No, it wasn't. I've heard about it from several places. Most recently, I saw it on the Glass Bookshop website. They're an Edmonton bookstore that has a great online catalog, and it was under Queerest of the Queer category. So I'm suspecting there'll be queer content too.
I think that's a good question.
It's fair assumption, yeah.
One of the co-owners of that shop, what is his name?
Jason Purcell is one of them.
Purcell. He is a former booktuber. Yeah. Britta, what have you got on your TBR for the beginning of the year?
Well, as you probably, at least you, Shawn, for sure know, I hardly ever read graphic novels. So I try to start every year with a graphic novel so that I at least read one. And in January, I will read this one, Red Rosa by Kate Evans, which is a graphic novel. Yeah, and then you have text. Fantastic. A graphic novel about the life of Rosa Luxemburg. I really admire Rosa Luxemburg, and I found this and I thought, okay, there I have my graphic novel. And the other one is, of course, a translated work, Waiting for Tomorrow by Natasha Appener, translated from the French by Jeffrey Strawn. And she's a Mauritian writer, and I don't know much about the book, but I loved her previous novel. And I picked this for a Reading Women challenge because the cover was designed by a woman. So I have this challenge done as well. So those are my the first two reads of January.
What was the other novel by her that you read?
The Last Brother. And she's always pretty dark in her stories. I have no idea whether this one will be as dark as The Last Brother, but we'll see.
I will quickly tell you about two of mine. This is an Indian novel from the 1990s, Trying to Grow by Firdaus Kanga. Firdaus Kanga is a Parsi writer, and I have talked about him on a page 112 tag recently, but I'm just excited to proselytize on his behalf because this book is out of print. So he is a gay disabled Parsi writer from India. And this book, Trying to Grow, was made into a movie, which I saw about 15 years ago and really loved. The movie is called Sixth Happiness, and he plays himself in the movie. He was born or developed a particular medical condition, osteogenesis imperfecta. Have anybody heard of that? It's a brittle bone disease that makes your bones brittle, and in the most extreme cases causes you to be a shorter person, and he has the most extreme version. So he is very short and just an amazing person, and this is his autobiographical novel that was made into the movie called Sixth Happiness, which I loved, but I had never read the book. I was talking about it with Jyotsna of Jyotsna's Bookscapades, a Mumbai-based booktuber. She's lovely. I'll put a link to our Zoom chat. And I mentioned it to her, and she didn't know about him. He lives in Bombay. And so we're buddy reading this in January.
Fabulous.
It's so fabulous. And it's out of print, so I ordered it from a marketplace seller, and it arrived. It's signed by the author.
Oh.
Wow.
Yeah.
And the cover is beautiful too.
Cover is beautiful, yeah. It's a really good condition that's used hardcover. There is Firdaus Kanga. I'm really stoked to dive into this one. And more briefly, one of my favorite authors, and I share this as a favorite with at least Lindy and Britta, but who knows? Let's see if we can go 3 for 3 with Tina, the Canadian writer Helen Humphreys, and her most recent novel, Rabbitfoot Bill. I think Lindy has read this, haven't you?
Yeah.
This is her latest novel, and it is set in Saskatchewan in 1947, and it is about a violent crime in small town Saskatchewan based on a true story. Have I got that right, Lindy?
Mm-hmm.
I don't.
Well, that sounds great.
Yeah, it's not a mystery, I hope.
No.
Okay, good. I'm going to be reading it. Helen Humphreys, there's a gift chain here. Lindy gave me a copy of her novella,
The Lost Garden.
The Lost Garden, and it's become one of my all-time favorite novels. And then I got a copy and sent it to Britta as a gift, and I think you loved it too, didn't you, Britta?
Absolutely, yeah.
All right.
So Tina, is Helen Humphreys on your radar?
She is now.
She is now, great.
Absolutely.
Very good.
Tina, since you like nonfiction, Helen Humphreys has written Ghost Orchard, and it's about apples.
The history
Right.
of apples or something.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh, that's super interesting.
Then another one of her books, The Frozen Thames, the publisher called it nonfiction, although Helen herself says it's just because it was a nonfiction editor that wanted to work with her.
Oh, okay.
What she's done is she's created these vignettes from history of all the different times that the Thames has frozen.
It rings a bell. I think I might have at least heard of it. I certainly haven't read it, but that
It's
also
wonderful.
sounds it.
I read The Ghost Orchard for Nonfiction November and really, really enjoyed it. It was awesome.
Okay. Well, I'm sold.
She lived in the UK for,
She was born there.
she was born there. Okay. But
Okay.
now she lives in Kingston, Ontario.
Yeah.
So this has been a fabulous year-end, beginning of the year discussion. And I think that even if we didn't have New Year's resolutions at the beginning of this chat, we all have a swollen TBR as a result of the chat, which is a fabulous kind of New Year's resolution to have. So I would
Absolutely.
Yes. I would like to give warm New Year's thanks to my BLT besties here, Britta, Bowler, Lindy, and Tina. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shawn. It
Thank
was
you.
fabulous.
It's been really fun.
And Happy New Year.
And Happy New Year to
Yeah.
you all.
Tina and Lindy, how do you say Happy New Year in French?
The bonne année.
Bonne
Bonne
année.
année.
Bonne année.
And
Bonne année.
in German and Dutch, Britta?
Een gutes neues jaar en een goed nieuwjaar.
Okay. And in Canadian, pass me another beer.
No Japanese. You should go with the Japanese.
Well, I don't know what you say before New Year's. Kenji, what's the greeting to wish Happy New Year before New Year's? Not Akimeshite omedetou gozaimasu, but the other one. Can you pick your head around just for a minute and teach us?
Maybe two kind of way,
Uh-huh.
but it's easy one is yoi otoshi o.
Yoi.
Yoi otosyo.
Yeah, it means the good new year. Like
Mhm.
Good New Year.
have a good new year.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yoi otusho.
Yoi otosyo.
Yoi otoshi o.
And then after New Year's, it's omedetou akimeshite gozaimasu, right?
Opposite.
Oh, I mangled it. Say it.
明けましておめでとうございま
Yes.
す。
Akimeshite omedetou gozaimasu. The second part is kotoshi mo yoroshiku onegaishimasu.
Yeah.
Which is Happy New Year. Let's get along well this year also.
Oh, yes,
Fantastic.
please.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yes, 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 please. Yes, please.
Yeah.
So there you go. Book 2 people, thanks for watching.